Go. Okay, and everybody can see my screen now. Good deal. Let's move you guys up here. Okay, so let's just kind of recap where we left off. So I'm going to go and run the server here. Of course, it's going to go up there. Okay, so here's our library. You can add a book, you can edit a book, and we can delete a book, right? Let's just delete one down here. So we can delete a book. Okay, so what we need to finish here so that we can add our second model is we need a show page for our books. What do you guys think we should do a show page before we do a second model, in this case anyway?
Is the show page where you're going to want to view your second model?
Yeah, so that's where we're going to render our second model for sure. Another good reason is that it's a lot easier to pass like IDs and that sort of thing down. If you're not having to prop drill for it, you can just pass it right from, well, not prop drill too far anyway. So here's our app.js, our index.js, just to refresh you guys. That looks pretty normal. Here's our books component where we're rendering our book form and our render books method. We have a book form, which works, we know. And here's our book, which is what our, pretty much this is our styling for our book and our buttons and so forth. So that being said, let's go ahead and do our show page. So I'm going to go and create a new file. We'll call this book view. It's not typing in there for some reason. Okay, we're going to import React. Okay, so let's just stub this out here. So const book view, do our arrow function, type our return, and do our export. Okay, so let's just go ahead and put an empty or a fragment tag here, just so our code's not broken. Okay, so what we're actually going to do in order to get to this page is rather than, I mean, we have our component for it, but rather than do a React router link, well, actually, we will probably do React router in here. So let's actually do that first, because this is going to give us our route so that we can gain access into the page. So we're going to import book view from components and book view. Okay, now let's go ahead and make our route. Okay, and let's go see what that route looks like here. So we want to go to our show, which is right here. And so this is the route that it's going to kind of look like here. So, well, actually, that's our reviews, right? So we're not quite to our reviews. Actually, let me refresh this because I think that's from when I was building out earlier. That's better. Okay, so here's just our books. So we want to get to our books path, so we're going to need the ID for that, right? So we're going to actually copy and paste that route right into here, because that's the route that we're going to need in order to get to our show. And we're going to render the component of book view. Okay, there we go. So let me get some stuff out of my way here. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to go into our book component, and we're going to make a new button in here. So we'll actually do this because we want that to show very last. So we're going to do another button. Okay. We're going to do, oh yeah, we were doing outline buttons. Okay. That's okay. So we'll just call this view book. And there we go. It's kind of big. So let's do a little style right now. So we're going to say size equals small, just so it looks uniform with the others. We'll do variant. And I think this one is just success. Oh, that's green. Hey, you know what? Green's fine. Let's do green. So here's our view book button. Obviously, it doesn't work yet. So what we need to do next is we're actually going to make this button a link. So what we need to do first is we need to go up here and we need to import our link. From React Router DOM, and we're going to pass that in down here. So we're going to say this is a link. And then we're going to give it a path. So it's going to be a link to, and we're going to give it path name. And here we're going to pass in that same path that we did here, except for we have to interpolate to get the ID, right? So let's pass that in. Okay, so let's take a look here. How do we have our props? So we just have them coming in as props. They're being passed as books. So let's go look at our books. So we're just spreading book as our prop. So that should give us access to our book ID. But what we need to do is we need to call it, since we called it props up here, I believe we just call props.id in here, and that should give us access to that. Okay, so let's go take a look here. Click it, and it takes us to an empty page. So let's just return something right here, just so we know that it's working. And let's return, oops, we'll say test. Okay, so we know it's linking us to the right place, right? So that's a good thing. Okay, so now let's go build out our book view. So let's actually change that from test. No, let's just call it, let's call it book view. Sorry, there we go. All right, so what are we going to need in here so that we can view our book? Any ideas? So if we weren't doing hooks, would this be a class component or a functional component? So in other words, do we need state in here? Or do we need a lifecycle method? Or do we need both? Any ideas?
Probably want a lifecycle method so we can pull whatever items down onto the page.
Okay. So like a component did mount, right? Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely need one of those. In order for a component did mount to work, generally that does need state, because you're going to be pushing the information you get from your Axios call to your state, right? So that'll mount. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's create our state. All we need in here is book and set book. And we're doing this as a singular book because we're only going to be grabbing the information we need out of one book object, right? So that's why we're going to pass in an object here to our use state, which let's go ahead and plug that in there. And let's make sure we import that as well. Otherwise, we won't have access to it. Okay, perfect. Now let's go ahead and import our use effect as well, because obviously we're going to need that if we're going to be doing a component did mount. And let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to do use effect. And here's our arrow function. Okay, so we're going to do an Axios call, do a get. And let's go see what route we need here in order for this to view. So we actually need the same route, right? We're just gonna have to interpolate that ID here as well. So let's put our backticks and let's pass that in here. And we know we're gonna need an ID. But as it stands right now, we don't have any of that information yet. So we'll tackle that in just a second. For now, let's go ahead and just finish filling out our use effect. So we're going to take the results, and we're going to go ahead and we'll just use set book from our state, and whatever the res.data is, we're going to go ahead and push that to our state. So since we're doing an Axios call, we should be only getting one object back, which we can push right to our state here. So that being said, let's not forget our infinite loop stopper before we continue on there. So what we need to do now is we need to figure out how we're going to get ID in here. So how do you think we can do that? So if we go into our, this is coming from our book, right? So here's our link and our button. So how do you think we can pass our ID, our props, basically our book object, down to our next component, to our book view component? Any ideas? No? Okay, that's all right. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a book object here, or a book variable. Now, we are receiving some props here, and we're receiving that from our books. And here is where we spread books. So this is where we have access to all of our book information, right? And we pass that down as props. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put what we need in here for a book object. So first thing we need is an ID. And our ID is going to be props.id because we're passing it through as props, right? Next, we're going to need the title, and that's going to be props.title. Then we're going to need an author. That'll be props.author. And the last thing we have is our summary. That'll be props.summary. Okay, looks pretty good. So we've created an object here set to a variable that has all of our attributes for our book that we have in our schema. We're passing the information down here from our books.js, right? So what we're going to do is we're actually going to go ahead and just pass that down to our book view. We can just pass it through pretty much right here. So after we do, let me look here. So after we do our interpolation, we're going to go ahead and pass our book objects. We're going to call book is our book. So this is us passing this book object down. So it has access to that, right? Okay. Oh, actually, do we need... I might be getting ahead of myself here. Actually, that should be good. Okay, so let's go take a look here at our browser. So here's our application. So it's telling us that ID is not defined in our book view. Let's go take a look at that. Oh, right, because we need to figure out how to pass that, right? So for now, just so we can see how this data, what data we're getting coming in, let's just comment out our use effect for now. And let's go ahead and bring in our props too. And we'll just call props for that. So here's our book view page. Let's go and open our dev tools. Go in our components here. Here's our book view. And here's all the props that we're receiving. So now we need to go in here and find the ID in our props. We know it's not going to be in our history because that just gives us, where we came from, that sort of thing. Let's go look in our location. Doesn't look like we have a title in here. It just gives us the path name. But here in match, we have something called params. That's the parameters. And in our params, we have our ID. So that tells us that here in our use effect, if we call props.match.params.id, then we should be able to grab that ID, because that's how it's coming through to us, is props in our match to our params and ID. Does that make sense to everybody, how that came through? Okay, great. And as you can see, yeah, there's our ID right there as number 4 in our route, right? Okay, so now that we have that, that means that in our state, we should have our book object as well, which we do now have. So here's the book that we have access to on this page. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and make it appear on the screen. So here's normally if I were doing a real world app where I would do a little custom CSS, but since we're, we don't have, a ton of time, we're just gonna go ahead and keep using stuff from React Bootstrap. We'll do another card because there's not really any better options in there from what I could see. And we're gonna import that from React Bootstrap. Okay, and then here in our book view, let's give ourselves a header tag. Let's go ahead and call our card. We're going to do our card header. Okay. So now that we're in here, we should have access to book now because our state is now loaded, right? So down here, we can just call, it's called book dot, oops, lowercase though, book dot title. If I can type, there we go. And there we go, there's our book title. Let's do a card body. And we have access to our book object still, so we'll do book.author. Right, and then lastly, Let's do another card body. And this is going to be our summary. So we'll do book.summary. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right, so now we have access to our book view. And if we hit our back arrow, we can go into any of these and we can view our books. All right, any questions on that? You guys feeling pretty good about the first model? Yeah? Okay, good. It's a good place to be. Let's see. And I'm just giving a little style to these just so they show up in the center of the page. Just because it looks a little nicer that way. Okay, good deal. All right, so let's go ahead and move on into our second model then in that case. Just real quick before I do is there's no questions on this first model before we move on to the second model. And it doesn't mean just what we did today, but in general at all. Anyone? Okay. Let's do it then. All right, so we're going to hop out of here. We're going to go to our terminal. Let's go ahead and close down our servers here. All right, and let's go ahead and generate our model. So we're going to do Rails G model. It's going to be called review. Let's see. Review. So review should probably have a title, I would think. Give it a title, and we'll give it a body. In a real world app, if we were using like authentication and users and that sort of thing, I'd probably have like an author or something that would display the username as the person that wrote it, or do like a timestamp to show the time that it was written or posted or whatever, right? But just for our purposes, since we're doing just a simple little app here, we'll forget about that. But let's not forget our belongs to. So this is going to book belongs to. That we have our has many associations, right? Okay, that's looking good, I think. Let's go ahead and run that. Okay, let's go take a look at our migration file. Always look at my migration file before I migrate, just to make sure I didn't forget something, which I often do. Okay, so we have our review, we have our title, body, and it has our belongs to association as well. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and migrate that. So we'll just do a Rails DB migrate. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and do our controller next. So Rails G controller. Don't forget your API, since we did use our API flag. As we reviews. And let's just go ahead and stub out all of our actions here, our CRUD actions. So we'll do index, show, new. Let's see, create, update, edit, I think is one, and destroy. We'll just do them all. And we'll skip our routes for those. Okay, there we go. So let's go take a look at our code here. So, all right, let's get over our migration file and let's just look at the schema. Okay, here's our reviews. Has access to the book ID, which we'll need. So that's perfect. All right, so that's looking good. Let's go up here and let's open, let's take a look at our models. Let's actually start in our models. So here's our review model. Already has our belongs to book association that we did in our terminal. But that means in our book, we need to add our has many associations. So let's go ahead and do that. Has many reviews. And let's go ahead and add our dependent destroy in here as well, because when we get to that part, we're going to need it. Okay, great. So that looks good. It's really all we need to do in our models here. Let's go to our routes next. It's going to be down here in our config. Oops, not Puma. We want our routes. Here we go. Okay, so here's our routes, but now we have our reviews. So we're going to go ahead and add our do there and resources reviews, and we'll end that as well since we added another loop. So now that we have that, let's go refresh our routes here. Oh, that's right, we don't have the server going. So actually, we'll double check those in a minute. Let's just finish up what we're doing in here first. So what we're going to do as far as building this out goes, I think we're going to just build this one controller action at a time rather than fill out the whole controller. Unless you guys would prefer that we fill out the whole controller first so you can see what that looks like. Want to just do it one at a time? Okay, great. So let's get into our controller here. So we're going to go to controllers, it's under our API and our reviews. Now, first thing that we should do, what's the first thing we should do in here? What are we going to need access to in all of our actions?
The book?
Yeah, exactly. We're going to need access to book, right? So that means that we should probably do our before method. And sorry, hold on one second. Okay, we're good. Okay, so let's do our before action. And we're going to set book. And we're going to leave it there. We're not going to say only because we need that set book for all of our CRUD actions. So we're just going to set book for everything. And then down here, let's do in our private method, let's define set book. Here we're going to do @book equals book.find. Go into our params hash. And we're going to grab that book ID, right? So it's going to be book underscore ID because we're in our reviews controller and not our book controller. We have to specify that we want the book ID. Okay, so now we should have access to our @book variable. So we'll go to our index here, and we're going to say render JSON, and we're going to do @book.reviews. So this is just going to render all of the reviews for that book. Okay. So let's start there. Let's get that working first, and then we'll kind of move along from there. So what we're going to do, well, actually, let's recap just to make sure we have everything. So we did our routes, we did our models, filled out our controller action. As far as our backend goes, we should be good to go, right? Okay, so let's actually go start up our servers again. We're going to need those as we do this. Okay, here we go. So here's that. Okay, and let's go refresh this for our routes. Okay, here we go. Here's our book reviews paths and our books paths. Okay, so what we're going to start here to get these to show is we're going to create a new file in our components. Okay, so let's create our component, new file. We'll call this reviews. Yes. Let's import React. We'll just stub this out and then we'll add anything we need to in here. So reviews. And we need our return statement here. And let's export that. Okay, let's go and just return our frag tag like usual, just so we know our app's not broken. And there we go. Okay. So let's take a look here. So first thing we're going to need in here is probably some state, right? We're going to need somewhere to store our reviews. So let's go ahead and establish our state. Call it reviews and set reviews. Use our useState hook, and that'll be an empty array. Okay, and let's make sure that we import our useState from React, so we have access to that. Okay. So let's actually do this. Let's go create a review in our console. That way we have some data to work with. So to do that, obviously we're going to close our servers. And I think I'm actually, now that we're adding a second model, I usually like to go in and reset my database because then I have fresh data to work with my seed file. I'm not missing any IDs or anything like that. You know, playing around with my delete function, that sort of thing. So for me, it just makes it a little bit more uniform, a little bit easier to manage my fake data that I'm using. So let's go and do a Rails DB drop, DB create, DB migrate, and then DB seed. Okay, there we go. That looks good. 100 books seeded. And let's go ahead and hop into our Rails console. Looks like we haven't, did we add PryRails? I thought we did. Search PryRails. Wonder why that's not working. Well, let's go ahead and do a bundle. Maybe that'll, maybe we're missing the bundle. Okay. Try again. That's weird. I wonder why we're in IRB and not our pry. Doesn't make any sense. Oh well, we'll forget about that. Didn't we have the same problem last week? That's weird. Okay, well, let's go and create a review. Let's do review.create. It's going to need, let's actually go look at our schema. So we're going to need a title, a body, and a book ID. So title, say great book. We'll say body. This is a great book, super descriptive and everything. And then we'll give it book ID. We'll assign this to book ID of 1, just to our first one. Okay, let's go ahead and enter. Okay, should be in there. So review.last, there's our review. Okay, looking good. All right, so now we have a review to play with. So let's go ahead and quit out of there. And let's go ahead and bring our server back up. All right. Looking good. All right. So now we have some data to play with. So now that we have some data, let's go ahead and get this moved up into our state here so that we can display it on our page. So to do that, what are we going to need in order to display this onto our page?
Use effect.
Absolutely right, Kyle. So let's go and import our use effect. Need that comma though. Okay, and give ourselves some space here. All right, let's go ahead and create our use effect. Okay, so here we're going to be doing an Axios call, right? So let's go and import Axios as well. Okay, and we're going to say Axios. This will be a GET request. And let's go take a look at what route we're going to be hitting. So we're doing our reviews index, basically. So this can be the index of all the reviews that are for a specific book, right? So that's going to be this route here. Looks like we are going to need a book ID. So that means we're going to interpolate that. So let's just copy and paste that in. And as it is now, we don't actually have a book ID. So we're just going to say book ID for now, just to fill it in, because we know that we're going to need it. And we'll figure out how to get that there in just a minute. Let's do our dot then. We're going to take the results, and we're going to set reviews with, surprise, surprise, our res.data, like we always do. Okay, and then let's also not forget our infinite loop stopper here. That way we don't kill our server. Okay, so as it is now, it's going to tell us, so actually if we try to render these reviews, so let's import reviews from reviews. And let's go ahead and give ourselves, let's do just another little underline here. And then let's go ahead and render that right here on our book view page. Okay, so as it is now, that's going to break our code because it's going to tell us the book ID here is not defined, right? And it's not defined because we don't have access to the book ID in this component yet, right? So what do you think we could do to pass in that book ID?
Would it be the same thing we did for the, was it books?
Here?
I forgot where we did it, but maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, you're okay. You mean how we did it earlier here?
Yeah.
It'll be a little bit different than that because this is within a path name that we're passing in. We're getting that from props, which, I mean, yeah, we are going to need props. So let's go and pass in props, even though we don't have any yet, but we are going to need those. And we're going to pass this down from our book view here. So what we're going to do is we're going to just pass in, we'll just name it book ID. And here we're going to pass in the ID. Now, if you notice here in this Axios call, we had to pass in the IDs props.match.params.id. So it's a safe bet to think that we're going to need to pass it in exactly the same way here, because that's how we're getting access to that ID in this page. Okay. Still telling us the book ID is not defined, but that's okay. We've only passed the prop. Let's actually destructure this here. So then rather than call it props, we'll just destructure it as book ID, which is what we named it. And then we'll pass that in here. So book ID. Okay, there we go. So we have our book ID. We're not returning anything yet. That's why it's not showing up here. So let's just do an H2 and let's call it book reviews. Okay, so there's our component rendering on our page underneath our book view. Beautiful. Okay, so let's actually go back here, refresh. All right. Okay, so here we are in our book review, or in our book view, right? Here's our state. So we're on book 1. So that means that we should have a review in here too. So let's take a look at our reviews. Here's our state for reviews, and our state does have an object in there. So we know that our use effect is working. So that's good. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to loop through our state, right? And we need to render that onto the page. So in what manner do we normally do that?
We need a render for
Yes,
the function.
Exactly. So we're going to create a function. We'll call it render reviews. And this is what we're going to use to render our reviews to the page. Okay. And there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and return. And let's map through our reviews array, even though there's only one there at the moment. And we'll call each one a review just to keep it simple. This time we're going to do an implicit return in here. And let's go ahead and return this. So for now, let's just go ahead and import a container. We'll probably end up doing this on a card again, but for now, let's just do a container. Okay. And let's give a little break here. Actually, we'll do that in a second. Okay, so we're going to return each one. We'll return it in a container. And let's see, we have our reviews. So let's do H3. And this will be our review.title. Okay, and then doesn't really matter. We can just do a p tag, and because we're going to change this in a minute anyway. This is just so we can get it to show on the page. And here we'll do review.body. Okay. So there we go. There's our function. Let's not forget to pass it a key. And we'll pass it the review ID. And let's go ahead and call our render reviews function down here. Okay, there we go. Let's go take a look at that. There we go. We have our reviews showing, so awesome. Not too shabby, right? Any questions on what we've done so far?
I got a question. I was going to ask earlier and I forgot. Could you go to your book view?
Sure.
Oh yeah, about the props.match.params.id, I would have never figure that out. So, how did you do that again? Sorry.
Oh no, you're all good. You're all good. So that one's a little weird. So let's go back to our components here. So we're in our book view, and it's all about how props are coming through to this component. So we're passing props here to our book view right here. So this is where we're passing our props, right? To our book view. So we're passing just a book object through right now. And this book object has our ID, our title, all that stuff, right? But the way it's being passed down in the app itself is it's coming through as props because we're not destructuring it when we're grabbing it here in our book view. So we know it's coming in as props. So if we look at our props here in our component, then we just have to go through each of these to see where it's coming through at. Now I can tell you it's generally never going to come through in the history because this just gives us some options for routing people to like the previous page and that sort of thing. Every once in a while, depending on how it's coming through, it may come in your location. So definitely a good idea to check there. But it's coming through in this match portion of our props. So props.match. And here in our params, we can see an ID there. So if we view that, then in our params, here's our ID. So we're going props.match.params.id. And so that's where the ID, oh, go ahead.
So is this components? I tried to download it, or the extension, but it didn't work. So is this the same thing as like when James will put a debugger and then he'll go to the console and check what's in there?
It's a little bit different than that.
Okay.
So debuggers are generally used to see if a function is firing when it's supposed to. And then it'll give us some information as to what's happening within that function when it is fired. So that's a little bit different. So this is just the way that the browser is breaking down props for our application.
Okay.
And so since that's how the browser is recognizing it, that's how we have to tell our code how to find it so that our browser knows what we're doing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I just don't have this components thing.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it just takes a lot of practice to really, understand where everything's coming down. And as I'm sure you guys have noticed, a lot of coding is abstract, so it's hard to, tell somebody in black and white this is exactly what's happening because there's a lot going on in the background that either we just don't know or is just hard to explain. I'm sure you guys have noticed that throughout the course, especially like if you're ever trying to explain to somebody else how to do something and they're like, well, where's this coming from? It's always a little bit difficult to explain that for sure. So it's one of those things that with practice, you just kind of get an intuitive knowledge of it. You know what I mean? So just keep practicing. It'll start to click for sure as you go through it. So, and I'll venture to guess that after your primary portfolio projects, you guys are going to feel pretty comfortable with that sort of thing, using your dev tools and all that good stuff. So all right. Any other questions before we continue on here?
Do you mind if I look at your book real quick?
Yeah, not at all.
Could you go down a little? Right here. So this as equals link. Have we used that before?
I'm not sure if you guys have used that before, but that's just something we have access to from React Router DOM. I would be surprised. I don't think James has ever used this in a lecture before. This might be something new for you guys. But your React Router DOM does have a few different things you can actually import and use, link obviously being one of them. And you can turn buttons into a link. You can actually, instead of doing a button, if I really wanted to, I could turn the entire card into a link so that you click on the card to view it rather than clicking on the button. So it just gives you access to different options of ways to get around inside of your application.
So is that pretty similar to just doing the link to? Because we've seen that before. It's just kind of a different syntax for it.
Yeah,
Oh,
same
yeah.
idea. Same idea for sure. So just the React equivalent of it, I guess. And the nice thing about it too is where in React Router, where we basically create our own routes, just makes it pretty simple to turn things into links with that too. So, yeah. Any other questions before we move forward? All good? All right. Okay, so what we're going to do next is, I always like to break my code down into as small components as possible. That way, if I need to use that code somewhere else in the application, it's already ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to break down this reviews a little bit further, and we're going to do just a review component so that each individual instance of a review is its own component. It'll be a lot easier to get IDs from it, and it'll be a lot easier to do our other CRUD actions with it too, like our update, our destroy, especially those two. So let's do that next. So let's go ahead and create a component. And we're going to call this review.js. Let's import React. And we're going to call this review. Let's do our return statement. And let's export that. Okay. And then in our return, let's go ahead and, as always, do our frag. Oh, it's not liking that for some reason. Oh, it's because I forgot the arrow on the arrow function. There we go. Okay, so like I said, we're probably going to turn this into a card just to keep things easy. So let's go ahead and import card from React Bootstrap. Okay, and let's go ahead and return a card. Let's do a card header. And we'll do that as a, I think we did that, let's do it as an H3. So here we're going to need access to the title, right? But we don't actually have access to our reviews yet. So let's actually come back here, back here to our reviews. And let's actually render this component right here in our return so that every single review here that we're mapping through is going to be an instance of that review component. So let's go and import that. And okay, there we go. Let's go take a look here. So here's our reviews. We have an empty card there. So at least we know the card is there. It's just doesn't know what to do with it. So if we put title in there, it's going to break, tells us that it doesn't know what title is. So let's go ahead and pass our reviews through. So what we're going to do is here in our review, let's give it a key. That way our console doesn't throw an error or a warning or whatever. We'll just review.id for our key. And then let's go ahead and pass in as a review just an instance of our review. So we're passing this review here that we're getting from our map down as a prop to our review component. It's going to destructure that here as review. And then we can call review.title here. Okay, there we go. There's our title. Not too shabby. Okay, and then now that we have that, let's go ahead and add our body. So we'll do card body. And here, let's render the review.body. Okay, there we go. Not too shabby. Let's just pass a little style in here. So give it a width so it's not taking up the whole page. And then in our header, let's have that center. There we go. Okay, so now we have our reviews rendering as a review component. So each one of these reviews is its own component. So that's this here. So if we had a second review, it would probably show underneath it, and it would be its own separate review component, and the key would be 2 because that would be the ID for the second one, and so forth. So pretty simple. Any questions? No? Okay. Got about 25 minutes, so let's just see how far we can get in the next few minutes here. So I think we'll stop coding about 6:50, and then I'll answer any questions you guys might have from there. So, all right. So next, let's create a form, and let's see if we can get adding a review done tonight. So let's go ahead and make a new component, and we'll call this review form. And as always, let's get it stubbed out. Get our return statement. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here we're going to be doing a form, obviously. So let's go ahead and import a couple of things from Bootstrap that I know we're going to need to do this. So first things first, we're going to need a form. We're probably going to need a button. From Bootstrap. So let's go ahead and call our form here. And let's go take a look at our Bootstrap components. So let's see, we're looking at forms. Here we go. So let's do our form label next. Label. And we'll just say title your review. Okay, and then we're going to do a form control. That's our input field. That's a self-closing. Okay, now in order for this to work, what are we going to need in our form in order to make our form work?
Have the submit and submit.
Yep, we will need that for sure, but we'll get to that in a minute. Before that, we're going to need some state though, right? So let's go ahead and get our state. So we're going to need our title and set title. And we're going to need our use state. And that's just going to be an empty string. Now let's go and import our useState from React. And we're going to need the same thing for the body. And set body. And that'll also be an empty string. Okay. So let's get our form control kind of filled out a little bit here, and we'll just kind of build this piece by piece. So let's give it a placeholder. And we'll just say title. This is going to be, this type input is just for Bootstrap. We'll say this is required. We're going to autofocus here. Do you guys all remember what autofocus does?
I don't. Could you explain that?
Yeah, autofocus is pretty simple. So what that does is when you have the form there, the cursor is already in this input. So they don't have to click in it. It's already there. They can just start typing. All right, let's give it a value. And this is going to be title. And let's go see what that looks like. Oh, we haven't rendered this anywhere, have we? So let's go render that. Let's do it right here above our reviews. So we're going to render our review form. Okay. Use state is not defined. I thought we imported that. Oh, I see. There we go. Okay, so there's our title. Can't do anything with it yet. Here we go. Here's our review form. Can't type in it yet, but there's our input field at least. And with the way that that's looking, let's get back. Oops, I closed that down, didn't I? Let's get back into our reviews, and let's actually give a little break here under the form, just so they're not right up against each other. There we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our on change for this input. So we're going to say on change. And here we're going to pass in an event into our, this is going to be an anonymous function here so that it doesn't fire as soon as it loads. And we're going to say with the event, you want to set body and e.target.value. So this is going to target our title as the value because we gave it the value of title right here, right? Okay, so we're still in our review form, and we still can't type in there, right? Oops. Okay, click out of there. Yeah, we still can't type in there. It's picking up what we're doing, but it's not doing anything with it. So what do you think we need to do? Because actually it should be working. What are we missing here? Oh, it's because I did set body and not set title, right? Silly. Okay, let's try that again. There we go. Now it's working. Okay, so now that we know that works, what we can actually do, let's actually put this into a form group. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take all this, we're going to copy it down. And let's just change a couple things in here. So rather than title, we'll just call it review. Placeholder is going to be review. Value is going to be review. And here we're going to do set body like we tried to do the first time. Okay. Review is not defined. Oh, we want body, not review, right? There we go. Okay, so that works. That works. Awesome. It's a good start. Any questions on any of that before we go in and try and get this to work?
So the value just gets what you're typing in there?
Yeah, so this value tells us where to send the information that's being received in the input field through our on change. So this value here is what we get from this value here.
Okay, cool.
So,
I ask it a lot, but I always forget.
no, that's okay. That's okay. So good deal. All right. Any other questions? All right. Let's see if we can get this going. So we are going to need a function in order to add a review, right? So let's go create that function. So we'll do this under our render. So we'll do const add review. It's just going to be a pretty simple one-liner. So here we're going to pass in a review, and this is the data that we're going to get from our form that we're passing in. And we're going to set reviews. And we're going to put the review that we're receiving on top, and we'll spread the rest of our review state after that. Okay, any questions about this little function? Okay, now we are going to need that function in our review form. So let's go ahead and pass that down as a prop. We'll pass it down as add review. Okay, so now we have that in our form. So now we're going to need, oh, yeah, we're in our review form, right? So now we're going to need to pass that through. So I'm just going to call props for now. And now we're going to need our handle submit, right? Let's see, I'm kind of blanking on the syntax for this for a second. Just 1 second here. Here we go. Okay, so this is just going to be our usual arrow function. First things first, let's do our prevent default. Okay, and we're going to need to pass that event in to our handle submit. Okay, so what are we going to do next in our handle submit? Anyone? So I think we're actually going to do a Axio post, right? Because we're going to send this information to the database. And I like to do so you can do this part in a couple different places. I like to do it here in the form because then I can send the information to the database that we're getting from the input, and then I can send that to my state through the add function that we created. So let's do our Axios. So let's go ahead and import Axios from Axios. And so let's do our Axios call. So we'll say axios.get, or actually post, because this is going to be an add, right? And let's go see what we need as far as our routes to post that. So here's our create, here's our post, and this is the route, or the path. So we're going to need a book ID in here. Okay, we're going to have to interpolate that. Let's go and do our dot then anyway. So we're going to take our results. And this is where we're going to send it through our feature. Not our feature, I'm sorry, our add function. That's the word I'm looking for. So we're going to call props dot, I think we call that add review. Right? Let's go make sure. Yeah, add review. And we're going to send it res.data. Okay, so that res.data then becomes, where are we at? Here we go in our reviews. Review, so that's our res.data that we're passing through, which we're then pushing to our state here, right? Okay, so first things first, where are we at? In our form, we need to get this book ID, right? So if we're in our reviews, and we have review form here, we need to pass our book ID. So what we can do is we can just call book ID equals book ID. That we're getting from our props up here in reviews, right? So if we pass that in as book ID and we're calling it props, then here when we interpolate, I can type, there we go. This is going to be props.book ID. Handle submit is not defined. Oh, right, because we need to make that a const, right? Okay. All right, so here we're not calling the actual prevent default function. So there we go. Okay, on our way. Now, one thing that we do need to do here as well that we actually didn't do is we need to add our submit button. So let's go ahead and add our button. Even though we're going to be passing this to the form. And this is just a bootstrap thing. We have to tell what type of button it is. And we'll call it submit. Okay, there's our submit button. Okay, so let's go pass our handle submit to our form. So we're going to say on submit equals, and we'll use our handle submit function. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out. Do you guys think it's going to work? Yes, no, maybe so.
Oh, he's back.
Yeah. Oh, did I freeze?
Yeah, you froze there for a second.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, guys. So I was asking, do you guys think this is going to work?
We need to go to the controller, right, in order for that to work.
That's very true. We do need to fill our controller, don't we? Good call. Good call. Okay, and we're doing our create, right? So let's start here in our new. Well, actually, I don't even think we have to put anything in there for this part. Let's see if it works without it. So let's do our review, and that's going to be at book.reviews.new, and we're going to pass in review params, right? Which we'll need to go create. So we're going to say if review.save render JSON review else, oops, it's render JSON, and we'll say any errors, and we're going to say review.errors, and we'll say status unprocessable, oops, entity. So this will give us a very specific error message in our real server if it fails.
If we got an error in
Thank you. Okay, so we should need in here. Oh, we need to do our review params, right? So let's review params. And we're going to say params.require. And we're going to pass in our review model. And we're going to permit. And we're going to allow them to update the title and the body. I think we do need to pass in the book ID here as well. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now that we have our controller, do you guys think this is going to work? Maybe? All right, well, let's try it out because we're coming up here on 7. We'll just say it was okay. And we'll say, I don't understand Latin. Because there's some reason Latin, so, you know. All right, so let's submit it. Okay, so it didn't do anything. What's it say in the console? So we have post, all right, let's go see what our terminal says. Here we go. Param is missing or the value is empty. Review. You guys ever seen that error before? So really what it's saying is that here in our controller, it's saying this review is empty. It's not receiving a review to pass through to our create. So let's go take a look here. So this is in our review form. And the reason why this is not working is because whenever we do a post, we have to pass in 2 arguments. We have to pass in the path that we're doing the request from, and we have to pass in an object as well, so it knows what we're passing through to that route. So what we need to do, and we'll make this quick since we're coming up real close, we'll go and call this book review. Okay. And we're going to set this just to an object. We're going to say the title is the title. And the body is going to be the body. So we're passing, so this is creating a new object. We're saying whatever this title is what this title is. Whatever this body is going to be whatever is in our state, right? So we're just passing through our state, creating a new object with those attributes, right? So then here we can pass that book review through as a parameter. There we go. And now it should be able to take that and post that to our database, which we can then set to our state, and it should show up here on our page. So let's go and try again. So it was okay, and I don't understand Latin. Let's hit submit. There we go. There's our review. Awesome, Possum. All right, so from there, let's actually call it a night. Do you guys have any questions or anything like that before I stop recording?
And you're gonna commit to GitHub and add it to YouTube, correct?
Absolutely. So I'll get this put up on GitHub. I'll try and get the YouTube video up tonight as well. If I don't get it up tonight, I'll do it first thing tomorrow morning when I get on. So
Sounds good. Thank you.
cool. All right.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and
Thanks, CC.